The sound source we had before this lecture is one of my works, titled "A Seed in a Tree in a Seed." So, Guten Tag, Guten Abend, Guten Tag. Which one is right? Guten Tag, ich bin Yoon Hye, ein Komponist aus Korea. Taking your precious time out of busy life. Today is Sunday, and it's grateful to be here. Today is the last day of Jeonggak Festival for the Korean traditional and contemporary music. And this lecture is before the last performance tonight. I will have a time with you in discussing on the subject of the tradition and contemporaneity, centering on several issues. 다음으로 넘겨주세요. I hope you enjoy this lecture at ease. What I share today is the one is the tradition and contemporaneity and new music in Korea. And main idea and idioms in my works. And lastly, a brief information on my music in today's performance. And since these topics are vast, but necessary, so I'm just asking your understanding that the discussion on these topics may just stay in raising issues. So we will go to the first topic. Tradition and contemporaneity. And it is very difficult to find an appropriate term that compared with the tradition. There could be novelty and avant-garde and contemporaneity and modernity. But these terms that could be interpreted in the context of the intent. So with this in mind, I will proceed to today's lecture. Tradition and contemporaneity, when they are paralleled, it seems like they are opposed, but they are not contradictory or contrasting. They are, both concepts, both terms, are something in progress, and both tradition and contemporaneity are undergoing continuously a kind of process of renewal and expansion. Tradition is a flowing, made by the sharing the various patterns of imitation as trend, the philosophy, and the thought, or discourses. And contemporaneity has a tendency to reject the tradition, while constantly recognizing and just imitating it. And when contemporaneity encounters the times as well as individual characteristics or special occasions, it rushes sometimes in unpredictable ways. 다음 페이지 넘어갈까요? What I want to say is that importantly I want to emphasize is that the contemporaneity will soon become a part of tradition, and this extended tradition will meet another new coming contemporaneity. So new times comes, new contemporaneity appears. To explain more, I just make some kind of the diagram, the picture. I think tradition is composed of two kinds of axes. The one is philosophical and ideological foundation through ages, and the other is a kind of the horizontal line of change of times. The novelty of the times is to be renewed over time and again and again. And the endless line, the arrow line that passes through the two axes, it means continuity and expansion of tradition. When this endless line just goes on, the area and angle widens. So it means the expansion and continuity of tradition. So we can understand that tradition is a flowing and being integrated with new novelty and new contemporary, and in music, new contemporary music. So this kind of the movement and development can be understood by the dialectical and spiral unfolding. This whole movement could be the tradition. This is what I want to emphasize in explaining tradition and contemporaneity. Then shall we move to the next page? Then how about Korea? You know about the Korea. And now that Korea is really dynamic in the culture and art, as well as society, and especially now in politics. And very sensitive to the trend of the times, and it emphasizes a new idea and originality. But this ongoing respect often causes there seems comparatively to have a limited perception over tradition. In music, the Korean music just considered as the music of the past. But as I told before, tradition is ongoing, flowing, continuously moving, and being integrated with new times. So traditional music, the Korean music, not stay in the past, and then just I think we are just the middle point between the past and the future. And then now the contemporary music of Korea is now this moment, the music at this moment. So Korean music, and it should be aware through the recognition and interpretation on the tradition, as I told you before. On the other hand, I need to give you the simple information on Korean music. Not like Western countries, the Korean traditional music has handed down through oral tradition. Now, can you have the sound sources? This sound source is oral sound of haegum, the string musical instrument. Probably you will see the evening concert. And then this one kind of we can estimate how the oral transmission has done. And of course we have a notation system with the traditional way, primarily for the skeletal notes. But memory and oral tradition is more important than the document or notation. Memory is more authorized than document or notation. It means Korean music, the semantic structure constitute sound structure. Let us imagine together when we play music, but there happens a difference between notation and the actual music learned from the master. What will you think? And what do we think about it? Usually, just we blame our master who doesn't teach well. The notation is right. But in the venue of Korean music, do we doubt notation? There should be something incorrect, the error in notation. So the oral transmission is much more important and authorized than notation. Of course, we have, so that's why the musicians played the very crucial role in transmitting music. And court music had been transmitted by the government organization, and folk music has handed down through musician, individual musician, and then usually the centering on the musical lineage. But with the variations added by the time changes. In the history of Korean music, there recorded the presence of composer in making music. But I think it is better for us to understand that Korean music has been formed through creation, revision, and variation by multi-composers and arrangers for a long time. However, from the mid-1930s, the Korean music has undergone a change. The orally transmitted traditional music that became notated until the staff notation and for the research or for the teaching. And the oral transmission style education also converted to institutional education. And individual composers appeared at this time. Now we arrive at the new music in Korea. Frankly, I'm really nervous, so I try to be relaxed. So you also just feel the relax and then ease, and then we can just make a lecture together. Before explaining the composers in Korea, I have to give you a simple information on two types of composers' educational background. That could be interpreted and as champ, according to Pierre Bourdieu. The champ, as you know, is the space of a social power where various positions are intertwined and structured. So this champ, two kinds of champ we have in the musical education. One is based on Western musical education, and the other is based on the Korean musical education. The so-called composition of Korean music originally belonged to the second category. However, nowadays, regardless of any champ, any educational background, there is a big tendency to observe and reflect the taste and demands of public audience to some extent. Of course, there are still going on works focusing on the traditional music, but it is not very noticeable. And however, in the area of Korean musical composition, the composers like me, are considering more the forward Korean musical instrument and then cultural identity along with the personal identity. And even though in this champ, the traditional or the cultural characteristics are faded more or less. 다음 페이지로 할까요? So, I already told you I consider tradition as the progression of continuity and expansion. I refer to here the traditional music and new contemporary music together as Korean music. With this in mind, we will just go further. And from the 20th century, in most of the musical composition of non-Western countries, they have influenced by the style of Western culture, including step notation or the basic music theory like the harmony and counterpoint and so on. However, despite of this, and in traditional musical aspect embedded in each culture is considered as the internal basis of composition. And composers of Korean music is inevitably the culturally and musically contemplating on the identity and idiom of a tradition. I just emphasize again, the composition of Korean music should be done in a deep awareness of contemporary tradition and contemporaneity. This relationship or just think more detailedly and seriously on this kind of matter should be helpful in composing in actual music. Then, how are tradition and contemporaneity connected in music making and musical composition? In fact, in the composition of Korean music, imitation and rejection of a tradition coexist. It means imitation and rejection of a tradition are always related to each other. So-called the contemporary music pursue the novelty of the times, but there is constant awareness on the tradition. Imitation is different from the representation. Representation and the new elements are fused together. That could be the imitation. Such new elements can be interpreted as a rejection of tradition or individual characteristics, or something revised by the times. In contemporary, even though it is the contemporary music considers the traditional musical aspect as the basis of imitation in contemporary style. At the same time, they have tendency, the contemporary music has a tendency to reject the tradition. Regarding to this compounding and complex state, we can discover the branches of desire to keep the tradition, a desire to renew the tradition, and a desire to make a different character from the previous tradition. So, such a kind of the various desires that exist in the contemporary music. And on the other hand, the rejection is the intentional avoidance. But it is impossible for one to reject tradition. Tradition remains in inherited thought and tacit actions. So, particularly in the non-Western countries, tradition is not only connected to the cultural identity, but to everyday life and latent way to think, and even the individual characteristics, and or even to how to make the concept of novelty. So it is just almost impossible to reject tradition. For example, and though it looks like a new element by rejecting tradition, in reality, they could be very part of tradition. That traditional elements are decomposed, dismantled, and just variated in homogeneous areas such as symbol and meaning, and musical form and structure, and mode of expression, and something like that. So these kind of things, maybe we can just think more about the coexistence of the tradition and contemporaneity in Korea. What I certainly say and they make an emphasis here is composition or composers of Korean music should not select one, either or between imitation and rejection, or either or between tradition and contemporaneity. If one select one clearly, it is much easier to lose the identity of a tradition, because we are living in the changing of times and tradition. So if one sticks to the previous tradition, we would lose ourselves. And on the contrary, if we conform to the change of times, we don't need to call our work as a part of tradition. So we have to stay in a kind of paradoxical cycle of imitation and rejection of tradition, and contemporaneity and tradition, and by the dialectical and the spirit of evolvement. 다음으로 넘어갈게요. This means we will go next page. Okay, one moment. I will just see my papers. Before this subject, actually, until now, I just shared my opinions on tradition and contemporaneity. But frankly, I confess, I have two desires. A desire to keep and renew the tradition. But I have another desire. A desire to move the souls of everyone by my music that is beyond the boundary of Korean music. I don't know how to hold both desires. I just want that someday, and two kinds of desire can talk and understand each other and be united. I really hope that someday could be today after this evening performance. Okay, now we are arrived at the main idea and idiom in my works. Now I'm proceeding my lecture very fastly. And this topic is which might be examples of what we shared till now. As a composer, when I compose music, are reminded of a basic principle of composition. It is to analyze, it is to the study and research the traditional music and to combine them with my musical time and space of a creative world. This is the rough diagram of my working flow. The analysis and deconstruction, their purpose, the purpose of analysis and deconstruction is integration. So the most important compositional method are acquired from this kind of process of analysis and deconstruction on the traditional music. Through such a process, there come the structural features like the musical form and structure and the rhythmic cycle and acoustic combination. And also come the organizational features like pitch renderings and how to produce sound and keep the resonance, and the sound functions and how to render the microtones. The whole outcome could be the idiom and the methodology of the Korean music composition for me. And regarding to the integration as composition, the integration between sound and meaning is very important to me. I mean, in Korean music, the meaning is more important than the sound itself. So weaving together of sound and meaning is very essential aesthetic logic in Korean music. So I just want to put that kind of aesthetic logic in the Korean musical composition. So this kind of the process is what I'm doing in the music composition. The traditional music is that I have to constantly study and research. Whenever I get to compose, firstly, I approach to traditional music as a theorist and trying to find a logic which I couldn't figure out before. Meanwhile, my emotional space as a composer meet some language and content of traditional music, I start carrying out my creative work. I don't know whether traditional music is leading the emotional or the kind of personal orientation, or whether the emotional tendency meet the traditional music. I only know that my musical space and time meet the traditional music at a point of my working flow. Now, I will introduce some of my works. I think I'm playing two kinds of roles. One is a researcher and arranger, and the other is a composer. And first, as a researcher and arranger of traditional music, I researched the old music, especially the remained in the old score and into the music performance. Sometimes we restored the musical instrument. And also I arrange the traditional music, like pansori, and I just keep the original melody and then I just made the arrangement into the chorus and the solo. So I don't want to, I just don't want to keep the originality, but I just don't make another, the acoustic combination. And this is the example of the arrangement of traditional music. And actually, 정각해 has proposed me, and 정각해 presented two kinds of traditional music. So, in the leader of 정각해, he just asked me to combine the two of the music. But already they are using the traditional notational system, so I decided to follow up to. So this one is one vocal solo, and then the other, the choir, all together, they are singing just the combination of the two old music. The next page, we will see the video clip, but the recording quality is not of good, so please, sorry for that. 다음 페이지 넘어주세요. Due to time limits, we'll skip the later part and we'll move to the next page. And then as composer, by my own, I will just introduce, I want to share with you some of my works. And the first is the 40 Days. 음악 들을까요? In 40 days, I want to embody and then the pulse and the flow of Korean music into musical structure and sound combination. And it takes 40 minutes and one movement without any kind of dividing component or chapters. And therefore, the whole the musical time and space as the one. 음악을 약간 좀 키울까요? The Korean and Western, the Asian musical instruments are organized together, and then I apply the Korean traditional techniques to Western musical instrument, such as the Korean style vibrato and sound function, in order to create a new musical space, nor Western music, and neither the Western music nor Korean music. 다음 페이지 한번 가볼게요. And the right side is a kind of symbolic diagram of the 9 players. And then this one is some part of my notation of the score of 40 days. You can see the violoncello, there is the curving, the small note, the more information on the Korean traditional the techniques such as the microtones or as I told you before, the vibrato or just the relationship between the note and note. 다음 줄 가볼까요? The time limit, maybe we will skip to next. 다음 줄 볼게요. 음악을 좀 들을까요? This is I Gaze on Your Voice. That was commissioned from the Schumann Fest to celebrate the 100th anniversary of Schumann birth. The time is there are the German musicians of baritone and piano, and along with the Korean musicians. So I just want to keep the cultural identity and musical idiom of the two cultures. So I made the German baritone to sing the text in German, extracted from the Schumann Lied, and Korean vocalist to sing the text in Korean, the extracted from 여창가고. 다음 페이지 가볼까요? Here is the table of my working note, and then just the text. There is a two part. The left one is just the text from the 여창가고, and the right side is baritone, just the German language. So they are singing simultaneously, and then different language and different idioms, musical idioms, in the expressing the musical language. The score, and you can see the Korean text and German text. In other, we have the 대금, 해금, and 가야금, and the Korean percussion and piano. 다음 페이지로 할게요. Next piece is a spiritual medium. My working view is of cycle, so I weave the musical structure by sound and meaning in performing stage and music together. I put the periwind instrument at the center, and then two percussions in left and right. I classify the materials of the percussion into leather and metal. So I put two groups in left and right. And also the triangle just symbolizes not only the location, not symbolize, just indicate the space of stage, the position on the stage, and then also just implies a symbolic relationship. The right side, the down, that one is the part of my working description, and then this three is kind of relationship among human being, the spiritual medium, and absolute being, and actually being united. And then small, there is a circle, and then the curve, and then the dotted triangle. And then I just made the kind of the musical movement and the structural features in applying these kinds of diagram. 다음 페이지로 갈게요. 음악 틀어야겠다 참. I forgot to play music. 다음 줄 볼게요. This one is first page of my this work. I don't know why. Even though I'm very clumsy painter. I like to draw some pictures of the notation to share the more the key relationship with the musicians, and also the express my intention on the compositional work. So this one is from the ground, just grows from the root. The tree is growing into the earth, like toward the tradition. 다음 문제 볼게요. 네, 다음 문제 할게요. And also in this work, I use the circular notation, and then there is the triangle, and then each the 3 points there are the specific notes. So when we play just more and more, maybe the notes are accumulated as time goes by, and the later the kind of huge the sound combination and acoustic chaos that is produced. So right side is how to play and the form, the acoustic, the affection, and how to play it. The one is I just write down the description. 다음 문제 할까요? Time goes very fast, so I have to move. And this one is 강산무진, Beyond the Bounds, River and Mountains. And this work proposed by 정가학계. The leader of 정가학계, one day he showed this very long picture. I just write the length of a painting. So he just want me to make the music. So probably this was kind of method to interrelate the musician and composer. So I accept very happily, and then I just compose the music, and with the long breath, and especially I just follow up to from left to the right of the painting. This long painting, they pictured the varieties of life, the small, the people. I think that there are very small people inside, under the tree, in the valley, on the road. The one is kind of universe of all kinds of sorrow and anxiety and happiness and excitement are gathered. So 강산무진 means from nothing to nothing, and then I want to make something. So next page, maybe now the HDMI has some problem, so I proceed through the paper. So we have to see the music, but I think now computer problem. Then we will go to next. Because we have the video clip, the sound, the quality of recording is not good. However, we can see how the pictures and the music and going together. So yeah, and this one is the simplify the picture. There is the power, the direction of power of painting, and then just can be classified the journey, the river, or tag, or the concluding. Just classify each component, and the below is musical structure according to it. Then we'll see this video clip shortly. The last piece I wanna introduce for the working is Soaring Toward the Absolute Solitude. This work also proposed by Jung Hye, and then one day, again, he showed me a picture of William Hochido. This is the first work I had to begin the combination, the cooperative work, the painting and the sound. The Jangseung of this painting is Jangseung, and we'll see later. The Jangseung is one of the three great artists in Joseon Dynasty, and depicting, you can imagine, an eagle standing with one leg on an odd-shaped stone in surging waves of the sea. My view is my working view is of a cycle, so I wanted to make that kind of cycle, so built by the continuous subdivision of sound and the resonance of them and interaction of inner rhythms. These features what I consider the way to reveal inner structure of Korean music, the way the Korean aesthetic implies inside. So I work this kind of music for the Korean musical instrument together, but try to make a more detailed order and then sound component for the revealing the inner structure of traditional music. 다음 페이지로 볼게요. This one is some score of my work. 다음으로 할게요. Due to time limit. And this one is picture. Yes, it's very, we cannot see exactly. And there is something, and then the eagle. 음악 들을게요. Let us stay for a while. So this static figure, the static dynamic motion, is very paradoxically come up to me. I think just this kind of static figure seems like a more dynamic than flying itself. So kind of moving quiescence that is connected to the essence of Korean music. So I was really impressed by this kind of emotion and feeling from this picture, and then connected to the musical time and space. We'll go to next. 음악을 줄여야겠어요. 제가 we've shared some of my works. My musical concern is always together with the culture and personal identity. So always there is interrelationship between individual creativity and tradition. As a result, I'm very sensitive to symbol and meaning. So kind of pareidolia, as you know, the pareidolia is a 음악 줄여야 될 것 같아요. Pareidolia is kind of tendency for the perception to impose a meaningful interpretation on nebulous stimulus visually, or for me textually, so that one sees an object and patterns and symbols where there is none. And silence is my main subject of my work. Silence. The most important materials for the sound work is silence for me. Silence is the space where sound is born, and the other side of sound, and meaning and symbol that make sound exist. And also I impose the time and space of silence as the basics, the structure. The silence is my musical and ideological space for my composition. I cannot embody all, but I try to keep my main materials. Symbolically, I organize that kind of time and space with text, images, meaning, symbols, and resonance, especially being unable to hear after actual sound is produced. And musically, I embodied such a kind of time and space in musical structure by ritual progression of the whole one with the detailed order. And also I put the spiral evolvement of rhythmic and acoustic movement style cycle as if being of breathing. So my work, the opening, the title of my work, it contains structural features as well as the subject of my music. 다음으로 할게요. And then now, finally, we arrive at the final topic. A brief explanation on today's performance of my work. And probably I have to finish this the lecture, I think, within 2 minutes. So,
Go ahead, 5 minutes more.
okay,
10 minutes.
okay, 4 minutes more. Yeah. So the title of my work is Full Moon Mother in the Belly of Crescent Baby. It's such a long title. This one is kind of ritual for the inner epic of all of us, and tracing the lunar orbit and toward the silence of the moon. And silence moon signifies a space where the beginning and end, and cause and effect, and past and future, and the life and death coexist. So it takes around 1 hour, 65 or 70 minutes. So for 1 hour is kind of a journey to navigate to the silence of moon. So this work composed of 9 steps. 다음 주제로 할까요? And this one is music table, and some of it. 다음으로 할게요. 네, main text and symbols from the 진도식 김굿, the one of the Korean shaman ritual, and the Misa liturgy, and Yeongsanjae Korean Buddhist ritual, and some poems and text. But paradoxically, the most of the text are intentionally not to be clearly heard, and the vowels and the resonance of text and sound are emphasized more, as if the symbol is more important than sound itself. So it's kind of sonic composition than the vocal and the instrumental accompaniment. And 6 performers as spiritual mediums, and they expose their sounds and combine each other's sound and orient them together into the original sound, the silence of the moon. 다음으로 할게요. So my notation, the time is going. 다음으로 할게요. So rather than explaining more, it's better for us to be in the performance. According to Carl Jung, the language and content of consciousness is symbol. The means of communication is dream. To imitate and change that, The language and content of music become the symbols from our own consciousness, and the way to communicate is the space of silence behind the sound we made together. 다음으로 갈게요. Today I discussed several topics on the tradition and contemporaneity, and shared my music with you. I impressed very much from all of you. The radiated from you all very special, so it makes me very happy and very energetic. So although unfamiliar music and thought, you didn't hesitate to come closer. So thank you very much for having been here. Vielen Dank.
Yes, I am confused in such a wonderful way about the division, non-existing division between tradition and contemporaneity. So that my questions, which I had before, seem not longer to apply in the right way. But I asked the audience whether some of you have one or other question to the composer.
I have one. At the beginning of your lecture, you said that the musicians are deciding are more important than the score.
Yes.
When it comes to your own work, at which point will that happen? Maybe in the future, once you're not there, or does it happen automatically when you perform that music?
Actually, in traditional music, just the orally transmitted, the point is more important than notation. But I think after since the 20th centuries, notation is important. But for me, I think as you see my notation, my scores, I just put more my energy and more information and intention on my work. So I can say that, and in my music, notation is basically important, but that is not enough to express the musical flowing. So musicians have to interpret and maybe recreate again, but notation is important for me. Thank you very much for a good question.
Yeah, my impression or my knowledge about the traditional music was or is that this music more or less has been developed through reconstruction and not so much through invention. In Western music, it's always the invention of the music, the first part, but not in Korea. So that the invention seemed to be something unconscious, because the music has changed over the centuries, but very slowly. Yeah, but you seem to combine this inventiveness and the use of the old sounds, structures, instruments. And you harmonize these two terms or parameters, which I thought have not been combinable. What is your opinion about this?
Actually, I couldn't understand what you asked, but I think maybe vaguely, yeah, I got to. Actually, when I by the composed music, that there are the traditional musical elements. However, there is a note and just, I think, very similar materials of Western musical instrument, in Western music. So I put more symbol and meaning, and then to the note, and by the expressing the Korean traditional techniques, and then put more emphasis on the meaningful development. For example, I just make a kind of the repetitive pattern, but that one is repeated again and again, but I think they are just elevated and more and more. In Korean music, it looks like just kind of repetition. You just appreciate the yesterday or the day before yesterday. But it is not just the repetition, it's kind of variation or part of variation. The repetition is also kind of one of methods in the variation, I think, in Korean music, because the yesterday music, the text are changed, and then aesthetic meaning has changed, even though the similar note and melodic, the movement that has applied to. So for me also, even though I used the kind of repetitive methodology in composition, but I put more the symbol involvement in my music. So I'm sorry, can I just satisfy your
Yes.
question?
Yeah, I'm completely happy. That's a journalistic happiness to have a silly question and a smart answer. So now we have to